Hi, everyone. I'm Maddie Rudder with Podfund. I'm the Director of Collaboration at Nexus Venture Collaborative. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much to Denise, to Anne, to everyone at Podcasters Unlimited for having me. And just looking, forward to meeting some people today. And first off, just kicking things off and talking a little bit about Podfund and a little bit about the future of Podfund and also the future of content innovation when it comes to podcast businesses and networks. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I wanted to put together a few things. Give me 1 second here. See if I can present. Great. So hopefully you can see my screen. So again, just want to talk a little bit this morning about how Podfund is fueling the future of audio first media. So a little bit about me and my company, Nexus Venture Collaborative. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Director of Collaboration at Nexus Venture Collaborative, and we are the managers of Podfund. I have a background, about a decades-long background in consumer research and innovation. So I'm very well versed in the innovation space and thinking about connecting with consumers, connecting with audience, kind of connecting always with that end user. Transitioned my career over into more of a VC or venture capital role at Nexus Venture Collaborative, and have been so thrilled getting to know the media and podcast industry over the last few months since we've taken over management. Nexus Venture Collaborative, we're one of the largest audio, media, and podcasting investors in the world. So not only do we have a venture fund of Podfund and all the wonderful podcast and media ventures in that portfolio, but also audio tech in general, whether it's new audio technologies, creator tools, just a breadth of audio experience in this space. And our main mission at Nexus is to really be positioned at this intersection between the industry, between entrepreneurs and startups, and just the ultimate ecosystem around these different industries and verticals, which makes our management now of Podfund just so critical in one of the areas, because we really see the media and podcast industry as this burgeoning pillar where collaboration currently might be lacking a little bit, kind of in the traditional sense, bringing industry players, creators, and corporates together, but that we can really play a role to create a very collaborative environment. So what is Podfund? Podfund was founded in 2019 by industry veteran Jake Shapiro, and it was created to provide, it was a very emerging creator-led to take those companies and give them funding. So it was all about the emerging creators and podcast studios and network, and kind of those really driving a business around a core strategy in a podcasting space, and providing them both capital, collaboration, and different business resources to help them grow. As I mentioned earlier, Nexus Venture Collaborative took over management of Podfund in 2020. And currently we have a portfolio of about 18 plus ventures that are really innovative podcast and media studios, really doing a lot on the content innovation front, dabbling in new formats, new medias, and kind of just ultimately rethinking business models within this space. So how does Podfund impact business growth? So one of the things that Podfund does is it's not just capital. It's not just money. And that's a really core tenet and core principle of what we're trying to do with Podfund is, again, kind of bring players together in a really collaborative platform. So it includes funding. It also includes strategic advisory and kind of business consulting, access to industry connections, a community, providing a community between the ventures in the portfolio and those in the application process, and even opportunities for corporate sponsorship. And that's really the true core crux of this is beyond just a typical, VC firm or fund, is creating more of this collaborative platform, because that is something that's so crucial to drive growth, is providing all the tools necessary in which to do that for your business or your network. So how it typically works, check sizes vary from 25,000 upwards of 150,000 of kind of seed and growth capital. So we're really participating in seed, Series A rounds. And it can be a mix of both equity financing and also debt or revenue financing. And so it's really just kind of this first place of this fund really focused on content innovation. So what's next for Podfund? So when it was created in 2019, we were really at the beginning stages of this audio renaissance. It was very burgeoning. We were just right in that, you could say the first inning. And as we move to 2021 and beyond, really see it as this acceleration of media transformation and content innovation. So it's really, our thesis has evolved to be more about more inclusive of podcasting, but also more in the media space as well. Really thinking of it as reimagining content, and that form can be in many different facets. It can be audio, it can be video, it can be social, it can be gaming, it can be interactive, it can be all of those things, kind of creating this really reimagined content experience, and utilizing differentiated business models as well. So again, as the industry starts to get a little bit more, we're kind of in uncharted territory in this audio first and podcasting space. So really trying to figure out what are those revenue models that work, and experimenting with, different ones, and rethinking business model and thinking business model innovation in this space. I wanted to take some time this morning to also just take a step back. That's a little bit about Podfund and kind of the inner workings and how things work. But I wanted to just share some things that I've experienced now from, my experience, kind of in more what I would call traditional tech ecosystems, and how some of those really can apply to scaling your podcast business or network. So let's explore these. Really at the core, when we think about content ventures, they need to be supported financially and strategically as businesses. So that is a core tenet, or one thing that we look for when it comes to investment from Podfund, is that this is a creator that's building a business, that's building a network, that has a real vision for how to generate revenue and how to grow that business over time. And so that's where you kind of start to ask yourself, are you a podcaster or are you a content creator? And as a content creator, you can imagine the opportunities just explode in the ways that you can take and build your business. And so that's how we like to think about, when we're kind of looking through and evaluating some of the different studios, the creators, the podcasters, the content creators coming through, is that vision for the future. And do they see that? Are they building a business versus just creating a passion project? And there's space for both of those things. They're both beautiful things, but we're looking for those on that trajectory path toward a business or a network. So one of the takeaways from the tech ecosystem that I would mention is kind of the idea of being audience-centric content development. So if you think of kind of in a traditional sense, when you think of maybe new product development, those product managers are really thinking about the end user, the consumer. What do they want? What features would they like to see in a new product or in a new solution? And so there's this opportunity, as you think about content innovation, to say, what audience am I trying to create? Who am I trying to reach? What do they want to hear? How do they want to engage with me? And kind of using your audience as this signal to help guide where you take your content, where you go down these paths to innovate in that sense. So it's really about asking yourself, who's listening? Who do I want to be listening? And how can I really reach them? A land and expand strategy. So you can think of, going after podcasting, creating a network, building a business, and saying, I'm going to land in podcasting. I'm going to build an audience here. I'm going to kind of create a voice here. And then from there, think about that expansion into that more broader creator space, right? What might be new formats, new ways to reach them? Is it, I have this podcast and I've created this audience and there's a newsletter component. That's how I want to reach this audience as well and build a community. I want to complement what I'm doing in my podcast with Clubhouse opportunities or social audio or video, or I want to engage in all these ways that kind of lets me expand the business and kind of create that bigger vision for the future as I move forward, and thinking about content creation in all the different facets, formats, different new technologies to bring into the fold as well. Creating a best-in-class audience experience. I mean, we see this all the time in more traditional industries and sectors where it's about creating this customer experience, creating this way where your brand is something so powerful to your consumer. It's more than just a brand. It's creating community. It's creating, a relationship between you as the creator and your audience, and creating, a connection or a community between your fans and each other in ways that they can kind of build that community among themselves. So thinking about all those touch points along the way, how are you really creating a best-in-class audience experience and throughout the whole journey of how they might engage and interact with your creations, your brand? Where are they, and how do you make that the most kind of fruitful, enjoyable experience as possible? And then thinking about applied innovation methods and frameworks. Again, as we think about, building or growing a podcast business or network, leveraging some tried and true methodologies, whether it's design thinking approaches, lean startup, creative problem solving techniques, the idea of testing, iterating, refining as you start to think about the strategic kind of view and vision for the business, and also those different ways to apply those techniques to differentiated business models as well. So areas in which to kind of play around with and understand what might work and how can I generate revenue streams in other ways. And then powerful perspectives. I think it's so clear that that voices and content, and there's so much to be said, and it's not coming out of one place. Many years ago in the technology or the startup ecosystem, one could say all of that was coming out of Silicon Valley. Right? I think we've heard that before. That's where startups are. They're in Silicon Valley. And we realize that's not true. That there are good ideas and there are good applications and there's creativity all over this world. And it's not only in one place. And one could be said in the content space that it's not all coming out of Hollywood or New York or some of those coastal cities. It's coming from everywhere, and everyone can, has a voice and has something to share, and really the power in those perspectives of the different storytelling and the different creations and the different ways that creators can kind of bring that to life. And then also the idea of perspectives in this idea of collaboration, of bringing together content creators and entrepreneurs and key industry players and, brands and marketers and all these elements that really create this robust ecosystem in a way that's scalable and that works and that makes sense, and that also provides a platform in which to do it, in a more concerted programmatic effort. And so perspectives is huge in any creation space. And then value added support platforms. A takeaway and how this can apply to podcasting businesses and networks is, in the startup space, you may have heard, you have these incubators, these accelerators, these places to go to kind of foster and build and create this business. And there really hasn't been a lot of that happening yet in the industry on the business and network side. And that is one thing that we at Podfund and Tech Nexus are really leaning into, is the idea of creating this holistic platform that's, kind of in that quasi accelerator incubator space where it's providing more than just a check. It's providing guidance and advisory and collaboration and community and all of those things to help build and grow a business in the content space. And so in summary, I just, kind of wanted to recap, those tenets that I talked about of what we can learn from, a traditional tech ecosystem and how that can apply to content. And then let's see, I'm going to see if we have any questions. But I would love, to open the dialogue if there's any questions about anything that I've shared. Open that to the group. But if not, it's been really wonderful sharing this with you. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. We can definitely connect here. I'll be around for a bit. Visit us at pod.fund. There's an application process, application form online for you to fill out. And you can read a little bit more about what we're working on and where we're going in the future. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll stay online just for a little bit in case any questions or comments come through, but thank you. So there's a question that came in that during the transition, we weren't taking applications. Are we now? So we are taking applications. We are always open to applications, and we assess those on like a rolling basis. So it might still be a wait time, but we are always accepting applications and reviewing those on an ongoing basis. Oh, cool. Okay, so I see a couple questions in the Q&A. So the one question: to apply for Podfund, do you need to have an existing podcast with decent traffic? So yes, one of the things as we think about the future of Podfund, it's really there does need to be some traction already shown and revenue being generated that kind of goes in line with what we were talking about earlier around investing in podcast businesses. So we do want to see a little bit of that traction and revenue and kind of a defined business model in that capacity. Yes. And then I work with a very mission-driven podcast and lots of niche creators who do social justice work. Where have you seen projects like this succeed in developing a sustainable model? I think in my experience and what I've seen is a lot of kind of a consolidation approach, which is probably where kind of the networking idea comes in. And so actually creating more of a studio entity around those individual podcasts and creators. That's where we've seen, if, you know, even in our portfolio, a lot of kind of maybe what originally started as a you know, couple of podcasts or creator driven kind of rolled itself up into a studio, and that's what we've seen kind of come through in and the trend that we're seeing in that space is, so there's this idea of that roll up and creating then a business around kind of that bigger initiative and bigger mission and value around that. So another question just came through. Can you add more clarity on what decent traffic revenue looks like? What if you have not seeked out sponsorship with intention, so no revenue to show? I think the question then would become kind of the idea of the vision for the business, right? So if there's no revenue to show and that's not something that you're seeking out, is this a business that you're a business that you're pursuing and building and growing and kind of have this vision for the future, or is it, you know, having a podcast as a passion project and something you just really enjoy doing? So that would be the question that I would ask is, you know, if you're not seeking, you know, kind of revenue or sponsorship or any of that now, is there a reason that that you're held back on that, and kind of thinking to the future and to grow it into a business to scale over time? I'm going to drop my email into the chat so you guys have access to that, to reach out with any other questions you have about Podfund. You can reach out there. Also, like I said, connect with me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Would love to continue any conversations via email or those channels as well. So I'm going to sign off of here, but I again, thank you so much to the team for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and to meet everyone. Bye.